Amazing, and now for the time we've been waiting for, the panel discussion. So this is all about how to succeed and stay ahead in data engineering. So I want to welcome Francis, who you met already, Fatima, Masha and Zoe. Give a round of applause, please.
Okay, so our topic tonight is around how to succeed and stay ahead in data engineering. So we're going to kick off with just a quick intro to the four of us, so you know a bit about who we are, how we got into data. So I started my journey as a BI developer. Very quickly realised that you can't get very far if your data isn't very good. So I then went into data warehousing, started doing a lot of ETL, lots of data modelling, especially Kimball, and created a couple of data warehouse solutions for insurance companies with BI suites over the top. And then went into data architecture, found out that in data architecture you don't really get to look at the data very much, it's a lot very theoretical. So I then went back into data management and thought, right, let's look at this from sort of capture the data all the way through the life cycle. And then more recently I've focused on data as a product and how we can bring together all of these things that I've learned in engineering, data management, data architecture to deliver really high impact data products. And I really enjoy when I can get data adopted by people that trust it. They don't want to use their gut anymore, they're happy to go and look and check the facts. Then I feel my job is done. So that's kind of a bit about my journey. I'm going to pass on to Fatima.
Hi, I'm Fatima. Thanks for having me today. I'm super excited about this. So I'm a data science and AI group leader at a company called WiseTech, which is a global tech company in the logistics sector. I've been working in tech for about 16 years, first for many years as an individual contributor, and about 5-6 years ago I started leading a data science team in an early stage startup called Shipamax, where we built an intelligent document processing system. So 2 years ago we were acquired by WiseTech, and nowadays we are responsible for all the machine learning, the data science behind the document processing and other AI projects as well. Yeah, and that's me. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Masha. This is very loud. Hi, everybody. I'm Masha. So my journey with data started when I was actually doing my PhD in political science. So I kind of focused on the quantitative methods. I used to teach statistics, and that's kind of how the research methods. So that's how I got into the, kind of into the whole data journey. And I think where I found myself is that it's really important to use data to tell the stories, and that is how I got a job in Parliament, kind of using data, being the data visualization and statistics lead. And that is when I, taught myself Python, got into SQL, so I was kind of a one-man band there. Then I got into data science mentoring, where I also, developed further my skills. And then for the last 4 years, I've been actually working in media. And sort of, first I led an analytics account, and now I've actually been building a data science and analytics team at a company called Foundry, which is one of the publicist media agencies. And sort of we've been, building data warehouse, developing the pipelines, and developing the analytics projects. So yeah, it's a windy journey.
Thank you. I'm Zoe. I'm head of data engineering at Reward. I've been there for 8.5 years now. I started my career in data after university in legal sector. Started managing the back-end databases, pulling SSRS reports, and then moved to Reward in 2016. And there I was doing ETL, data warehousing, CRM systems, and up to where I am now, which is head of data engineering, and I now look after a team of 16 people. We work in Agile, we do lots of projects across the whole company, and it's been a really, really good journey for me. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. Awesome, thank you everyone. So the way we're going to structure this tonight is we're going to go through kind of 3 topics that we've already discussed. We kind of have some really good exciting insights to share. And then at the end, we'll open the floor to questions as well. So please take note of questions as you go along, and yeah, we'd love to hear them at the end. So to start us off then, there's a lot of discussion about value when you're talking about data, and we talk about how the projects that we work on should be delivering value. So the teams that you work with and the projects that you're working on at the minute, how do you bring and keep that focus on value in the data engineering space? I'm going to go to Masha first.
Yeah, so my kind of counter question is, and it's not necessarily to Francis, but overall, is how do you actually measure value? Because you can measure it financially, but when it comes to, I think, data engineering projects, especially when you're laying the foundations, and especially if you're not necessarily in a banking sector where data is really crucial, it's really quite hard to measure that and to kind of because when you're laying those foundations, the projects that come after it and kind of enable the money-making projects and things like that, it's quite hard to, so I think that, because the analogy that comes to mind is a little bit like plumbing, that you don't think of it unless it breaks. So, and I feel like data engineering is a little bit like that. Everybody kind of takes it for granted. So I think that you kind of have to think beyond think of what does your project actually enable and what does your function enable, and it helps also to kind of shift that focus in the organizations from seeing sort of IT and data functions as cost centers to shift it to the sort of we're actually enabling and unlocking a lot of value for the company. So that's kind of, yeah.
Thank you. Zoe?
So for me, the word value has such a financial connotation that it can, as you said, be misleading as to what you're actually trying to bring. For me, it's we bring value by progressing. How is what we're doing progressing the team, progressing the company, improving processes? It could be, making things more operationally efficient, which means reducing headcount. It could be that headcount then gets to upskill in something else. It could be data quality. Data quality is such a massive thing, and every company measures data quality differently. So it's getting that definition of actually what does value mean to you and to the company, and then you can work out how the team are delivering value and how the team are helping progress the company's objectives.
And is that something that you get asked to do in your team? Do you get asked to measure the value?
We get asked to measure via like OKRs and KPIs and things like that. We do have data quality framework that we assess ourselves against as well. So things like, have we received all the files we need to receive? Do they have all the correct data? Are there columns missing? Is it the right format, etc.? And getting that to an automated state is so tricky because it's different for everyone. There's no single data quality framework that suits everything. So finding those core values of what data quality means is really important, and that for me is the backbone of how you can drive value.
Thank you. Fatima, how about your organisation?
So for me, I think it's mainly about really understanding what's important for the company you work for your stakeholders. I think one of the most important aspects is to actually focus on very specific business use cases and to really focus on target problems that are important for your stakeholders. So for example, I always try to keep the scope of my initiatives and the initiatives of my team very, very narrow and very well defined. Also, when you measure, I think to try to keep very simple metrics. I think sometimes it's very tempted to use a lot of KPIs and very complicated KPIs that are very interesting for us as technical people, and sometimes they can even come across as very creative, but however they don't really are very meaningful for other parts of the business. So to really keep the KPIs very simple, and even if you can just measure one thing, that would be really ideal. So I also think it's so for example, at Chica Max, when we started, so we focused on like just one document type. So it kept the scope really very narrow, and the focus on the document type that we, at the time, we know that it would be the most impactful for our customers. So when we measure like user corrections and things like that, they are a proxy for the level of automation that we provide to our customers.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting there, and I think that it is very unique to each company what value means. And I think we, also remembering that data can be a means to an end. We are enabling and facilitating processes, and we need to be able to prove our own value first before we can then start to say, we are saving the business X because our process has given you this, or we are, improving our marketing by X amount. And then it's so important to use the baselines that we set out to know then how you're growing. So I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was talking about the rate of change, and it was talking about it in the context of burnout actually. But it was saying if you're 40 today, by the time you're 60, you'll experience a year of change in 3 months. So the rate of change is not slowing down, it's speeding up. It says that if you're 10 today, that rate of change that we experience in a year now, you'll experience in 10 days by the time you're 60. So there's a lot of change, there's a lot going on. The last few years, for me personally, I felt like it's taken a lot more effort to keep up with the rate of change, and it's become much more about picking and choosing what I actually need to know about. So the next question is around, with that anxiety to be on top of everything, how do you prioritise your learning as a leader to stay on top of the changing landscape within data engineering? And Zoe, if I can go to you first on that one.
So for me, it's sort of listening to podcasts, reading blogs, or reading articles, all that sort of stuff. But I'm a very practical learner. I find that I have to apply something to a use case, try it out and see how it works. My brain can only hold so much information, and by reading it, it just doesn't stick. I have to have like a practical use case for it. The other thing that I've found is a lot of it can be noise and not necessarily relevant to what you're doing or what your team is doing. So it's really important to, if you think something's really cool, it might be useful in the future but might not be useful right now. File it away, and then when you get a use case for it, you can then try it out.
Fatima, you next.
Yeah, I think nowadays can really be so challenging, and it makes us feel that we are chasing after our tail. I think for me, it's very important to understand things at a very high level and be on the top of the trends, and knowing that I am in a position where when I need to go deeper into a topic, I know where to look and I know how to do the research. And I think, so I've had some, for example, colleagues saying that because they especially for people who work with the LLMs, with AI, there is so much going on a weekly basis. And I've had colleagues saying that, that kind of makes them feel they have this imposter syndrome. I think it's very important to really take a step back. So you want to be on the top of advances that are important to you, but you really need at the same time to take a step back and understand actually you don't really need to know everything, and you also need to be kind of very skeptical about everything that is being pushed onto you. So from that perspective, I also think you always say that soft skills are very important for data scientists, but I also think because of the changes, soft skills are more important than ever for people in our profession, because it's also things like emotional intelligence, for example, that helps you to adapt and cope with this change, and also learning from others. So keep that in mind also. So it's not only really about the technical.
Thank you, it's a really good point. Masha, what's your view on keeping up with change?
Yeah, I think I'm similar to Zoe actually. I really need a use case because there's a lot going on. So I'm usually kind of selecting a problem and then doing the research on what's going on in that field. I'm also very lucky in a way that there's a guy on my team who is absolute fanatic of all things AI and LLMs, and he's following all the blogs and all the podcasts and testing literally in his free time every single new trend basically. So but then he shares it with the team. So I think when you hang out with people like that, and if you're a person like that, then definitely share with the wider team, because it is quite contagious, and you kind of like, when you hear it from a person, it's a bit like more specific and it's easier to digest. Also, events like this, I would say, are also quite very, very useful, and so get out there and talk to people, kind of thing, because I think it's you do meet those passionate enthusiasts, and I find that is quite often very helpful.
Yeah, I think I really like that point, the talking to people and then practically doing it. I think actually really, really, really helpful. I think the other thing as well is there does feel like there's a lot of new stuff going on, and if you can't keep up with it, you won't cope. I went on maternity leave as Hadoop was coming in. By the time I had 3 kids, Hadoop was going out. So I kind of go, well, I just missed that, and it doesn't actually impact on my career at all. And some of the problems that I was trying to solve 15 years ago when I started in data are still there. So yes, the technology changes around us, but underneath it, the same problems are still there for us to solve, the same techniques are used. So I think practical, talking to others about it, not caving into imposter syndrome, 3 really good points there. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is probably a very, very one that's close to a lot of people's hearts, but there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of data tools out there at the minute. So how did you choose the right tools for your organisation, and do you feel you have the right ones now? And so Zoe, I'm going to start with you on this one again as well.
No, we definitely don't have the right tools for the organisation. Getting buy-in for new modern data tools can be tricky, going back to value, if you can't prove the value. So getting buy-in from the stakeholders has been tricky, but from a financial perspective, we have just done a migration from Tableau to Power BI. So for us, that move was about picking a tool that did the job rather than the shiny, fancy, super analytical tool, because we weren't using any of those features. We just needed standard bar charts, pie charts, line graphs, etc. For us, that meant obviously a migration project. It saved us, I think, about £50,000 in licenses, EC2 costs, RDS costs, etc. So the business really saw that as a massive financial gain. For us, it was a simpler tool to manage because we got rid of the infrastructure, because it's Power BI is a SaaS platform, so we've got rid of the infrastructure admin. That for us was a really good case study and selling point to show the business we were providing value. Now I've got to replicate that for the other data tools that I want to get in as well.
Good luck with that one. So Fatima, on to you, same question.
I agree with Zoe, so it's not really about necessarily getting the fanciest tool, the most sophisticated tool. You can really go a long way with sometimes something a bit more traditional, a bit simpler. I mean, for example, in my team at some point we needed to upgrade our annotation tool, and we've done some research. So we annotated, so just in the past couple of years, we actually annotated lots of hundreds of thousands of logistic documents, which are actually very complicated. And we just realized that actually the best fit for our problem was a free version of a known annotation tool, plus some enhancement that we've done on the top of it. So it was really like very, very effective and a very simple solution in the end. So it's really about, again, being able to step back from everything that's being offered, and you can solve so many of your problems with very simple tools and simple technologies.
And Masha, same question to you. How's your tooling?
Yeah, so I had an interesting experience because when I started my job a year and a half ago, I came into, Publicis is a huge organization with many, many different corners. And so in our corner, people just used Excel spreadsheets and all that. And I was like, well, we're building an analytics team. We need a warehouse. And the thing in Publicis is they have accounts with all the major, you could do Databricks, you could do AWS, you could do BigQuery. So I was like, well, which one should we choose? And as you both mentioned, it's about, I think, the use case and kind of also stepping back and seeing, what is the next project and which solution will provide us with that, with the right infrastructure. And so having assessed many, and I found the pricing plans actually quite confusing. They're not very transparent, and this, yeah. So asking ChatGPT didn't help either because, well, it all depends. So at the end of the, and also I think the other thing that is to consider is also the learning curves and sort of what your team is actually familiar with and what are the different learning curves. So in the end, we went with the GCP with Google Cloud. Because I've used it mainly before and because some of the team have used it before, but also it does provide the widest sort of capabilities. So now we're getting into Vertex AI and deploying LLMs and all that. So that works really, really well. So I think it basically depends on your use case. So yeah, never go, I'd say, for the shiniest or sometimes not always the most convenient. Kind of if you have a bigger picture, then that's I think more useful.
Thank you. So I think what we're hearing there is it's very particular to your use case. What can you get buy-in for? What's the money for? Where can you prove that it's going to give you cost savings or more value? But also thinking about what you need in the short term, not necessarily 5 years out because it's likely to have changed again. So what do you need to get you through the functionality now and the short term? And it's not always easy, I think. Big step back. We find a lot of our clients come and ask about tooling and pricing structures and what do we know and where else have we done it and what works, what doesn't, what's lasted. What's lasted is the big question. Did this last? So yeah, it's lots of choice, lots of difficult discussions there. So finally, you've all worked in tech roles and then moved into a leadership role. How did you find that transition and what advice would you give to someone kind of coming up to that stage of their career? Masha, I'm going to start with you.
It's an interesting question, and I was at one of the roundtables the other day, and the topic was framed as what skill did you not think of when you were sort of moving into the leadership role, and the skill that we all agreed is actually selling, because as the data team lead, whether it be data engineering or machine learning or AI, you have to sell your projects. You have to sell it to internal stakeholders, whether it be internal or external. And it's a really important skill because you have to I think, and the transition is to stop speaking just the data language and actually switch to the language of your business users, of your stakeholders of the wider organization, and really learning to spin the yarn and do the storytelling, because people's eyes often glaze over when you go into the details of the data project. So you really need to make it compelling, and I think there is a bit of it's a hard sell sometimes, because often it's quite a huge investment up front, and then the fruits come a little bit later, and so you need to manage expectation but also sell and then deliver. What is it? Under promise and over deliver. So I would say that these soft skills that Fatima has mentioned before, that is really important. That's selling. Yeah.
Same question to you, Zoe.
So I found it quite tricky, first of all, going from an individual contributor to a manager, where the team, your success is driven by the team's success. It was a learning curve. But the team that I've got now are absolutely brilliant. I trust them. It was very difficult for me at the beginning to delegate. Sorry, Chris. But it all worked out. All worked out in the end. But for me, the biggest learning point is about managing stakeholder relationships. When you start getting up into that level, you have to really change your communication style depending on who you're talking to. and understand that you can have a lot of influence over their decisions and they can have a lot of influence over your decisions. And like you say, it's reading the room and reading the people that you're talking to and how to get the most out of people.
Very good. Fatima, same question to you.
Yeah, so when you step into a leadership role, I completely agree, it's all about people skills and soft skills. Something that for me was quite challenging at the beginning was that more often than not, I found myself as the center of many different points of view, and it was crucial for me to be able to find the middle ground, and that could be different points of view within my team or with stakeholders. And that for me was quite challenging. So again, to be able to have the soft skills to influence others and to really actually take a step back and not making assumptions and to try to really work hard to understand other people's motivations and requirements, I think that's really fundamental.
Yeah, I think that's really important because it's not just you anymore. It's taking into account how everyone else is going to feel about it. Off you go.
As the team scaled from 2 people, just me and another person, to the team of 16 we are now, the ways of working had to really, really change. So we implemented Agile and Scrum, and that started working really well. We then realised we needed to break out into smaller Scrum teams, which we did. And for me, that was... It gave me the confidence that the team were estimating properly, that we could give deadlines to stakeholders of when we expected to deliver things. So for me, that was a massive achievement at the time. But actually now, taking that a step further, I've now implemented scaled Agile across the entire engineering department. So now our Exco team are getting all these weekly reports of when the entire engineering team are going to deliver stuff. We have a 10-week plan of what we're going to deliver. And the communication is really clear. Everyone knows exactly what's going to be delivered when. So changing the ways of working at such a massive scale like that was a really big deal for me.
Awesome, that's a great one. Masha?
Yeah, so for me, I think professionally, it's building that data analytics team entirely from scratch, sort of from 1 person to about 7 or 8 people now, with like in the process of hiring more. And also establishing, the data warehouse and navigating it all. I sort of was expecting to come into a smallish agency, and when they didn't tell me that it's part of Publicis, which is an enormous company, so it's kind of navigating that huge politics, which is more complicated than Parliament, that organization. So that's like, I'm like patting myself on the back for that one professionally. But I think personally, it's actually mentoring the people and seeing them grow and watching them go into bigger and better things. Like for me personally, that is the most like heartwarming experience, and I would put that as my biggest achievement. I think that I've nurtured quite a few people who've gone in the previous team and also in this one onto much bigger and better things, and and they thanked me for that. So yeah, that's for me.
Amazing, cutting through the red tape and developing others. They're two big achievements there, definitely. Fatima, finally.
I think it's very similar for me what I achieved with the Shiva Maxica Science team, and we have some team members here, by the way. Yeah. So I started a new team when the team was 5, and then I scaled the team when we actually got Series A. So we've scaled through horror in the first year or 2, and 4 years after we were acquired by WiseTech because of the product that we built, and I was really so proud of the team and for seeing what we were able to really achieve together and see how much everyone had learned and grown and achieved. I think that was for me what made me the proudest, really.
I love that in a tech world, it still comes down to people at the end. It's amazing, isn't it? But it's so true. I mean, watching the people grow in particular, I love catching up with my old advisees and just finding out what they're doing and seeing how well they've grown. So at this point, I'm going to open the floor. So if you've got any questions.
First and foremost, thank you so much for this. Love it. For 2 hours more, I could easily sit here and listen to the conversation about tooling, but I love the rest as well. My question to you, I think you'll be quite divisive for the audience, like any good question. recently there's been a huge push, obviously, towards AI. For better or for worse, I'm sure you're feeling it from the business. The managers are going, we need to be AI, we need to develop this thing. And I think as engineers, we're uniquely placed to see that a lot of these solutions that we're developing are jamming a square peg into a round hole. Now, what's your perception of it? How bad is it? Is that likely to carry on, or are you embracing it? Because when you mentioned your proudest achievements, you mentioned people, but not necessarily the AI implementation yet. So what are your thoughts around that?
We've been really pushed lately to have an AI agenda. What are we going to do with AI? What do we want to build? I think we're still too junior for that conversation at the moment. Our data architecture needs to change, our tooling needs to change to really kind of make use of AI properly. It's a very interesting conversation because, as you say, it literally is everywhere. But it's like any other tooling. I view it as any other tooling. It's important to find the right use case, do your research, and make sure that it fits, rather than, as you say, doing a square peg into a round hole.
Can I just add to my point? Yeah. Have you found that the solutions you have implemented already have been like bang on target and they've been exactly what you've been expecting, or did it perhaps not work as you would have hoped?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of good examples, but I'm going to start with a long, winded road of like that, I think it was early last year, Publicis announced that they invested, bajillions into AI and AI. But then, so the guy on my team who is the huge AI enthusiast, he was like, all right, where we go, let's go, let's do it. And then came the legal team and said, no, actually you can't use any of the client data, and you can't use this, and you can't use that. I was like, well, what can I use? And then it took him about, I think, 7 months to find the right people who would give him the right access. And then speaking of the business and buy-in, when sort of a client lead with a very powerful influence and a very huge buy-in into these AI projects got on the case, we came up with he had some really good use cases, and he knew the right people who could, get the right machine and get the right tools and get the right, get the API access. And we actually have developed some really good projects. So he's using the basically created like an AI chatbot for like doing the campaign plans basically. So you check all the media plans and then you do like, oh, I have this much money, I have this much budget, what should I do? But then it's become political again, because then came the media planners who were like, oh, that's going to take my job, so can we do so now we're expanding it to a wider project of like, okay, it's not going to do that, but it will consult all these other documents. So it's going to be like a reg database, and then it's going to pull basically stuff, for outside of the media plans basically. And the other interesting project that they did is, like the marketing personas. So, and it would take usually quite a few weeks for people to go through the GWI data and then sort of do different personas. Well, he created like basically a bunch of agents that do that. And there is human input as well. Again, was a lot of, like worry about what's going on underneath the hood. But it has come to fruition. But you need, like in a large organization, you need a buy-in from a powerful stakeholder who can push these things through. And B, you need a lot of like talking. And C, actually, the quality of data, with some of the project had to be put on hold because, just the data quality was not there. So some things work, some things not. So, but we have some good use cases actually, but it's been a journey. And I think that, I would say where things have really got going is when the powerful person got involved, as usual.
So I'm actually embracing it, and I think my team is also embracing it cautiously. So at WiseTech, I don't feel that we are being pushed into adopting AI or going into crazy AI projects. I think there is definitely huge curiosity and huge enthusiasm from the senior management, and for that reason I also was able to get the support I wanted to initiate the first agentic AI projects in the company. So where we are now, So first to answer your question, are these projects going as expected? I don't know exactly what we expected, honestly. I try not to expect much. I think where WiseTech is, my team is, I think, also I've been in a roundtable quite recently discussing this, and my understanding is most companies are at a stage where we are all learning, we are all discovering and trying to understand what are the use cases. I think my advice would be for anyone who really wants to experiment with these technologies and apply them in your company would be to really, don't go into very broad, very abstract AI applications. And again, back to one of a previous question, really focus on very, very specific use cases. So we started 2 projects that we built a first version, and now we are going to start to scale. We've had challenges, so many aspects were not what we expected. End of the day is all about really, really understanding the domain side, so the business side of the problem, and it's all about data quality over and over and over again. Discussions about these projects most of the time are really not about the RAG pipeline or LangChain. They are actually always about the data, like 99% of the time about the data. So my advice would really be, be open, but at the same time be very reasonable and try to find, very specific targeted use cases. But I think the potential is really very promising.
I think, as a consultancy, we're focusing on it for us and our clients. So we are starting to build things internally that we are using. We've built things with our client that are in production. We've built a lot of things with clients that are in use case and are in pre-production, because there's a lot of legal paperwork to get it through. There's a lot of, you need to be able to monitor the quality of the data going in. So not only does it have to be good, it has to stay good. So there's a lot of work that we've done where I'd say it's in POC and it gets stuck there because it's either too narrow to provide the value and they can't scale it out. But I'd say most clients that I speak to are doing some work and some investigation on it, and it is moving forward, and there are definitely some that we've successfully launched.
Can I just add one more? I think the problem that we've also encountered is documentation. Like, the tech is moving so much faster than any documentation. All of the tutorials are out of date like the next day. So this is something to, you have to have a bit of patience, I think. And yeah, that's been a bit of a problem.
Hi. My question would be a bit more fundamental. For instance, if somebody wanted to start working in data engineering, it's well known, in fact, that we all need to create our own portfolios. We need to showcase our work, and quite a lot of job ads, what they're going to say pandas, but we want 3 years professional experience, or NumPy, we want you to have this sort of experience within a corporate environment. So, and the other issue is there are so many tools. So you have the open source tools, and then you have the clouds. Each cloud is unique in its way. What would be your recommendation from your experience on what would be the best way to approach that? Do we go fully open source and just create our own projects? Do we just focus around the technology of, let's say, Azure? What would you say in that case?
I would say it depends on the company, depends on the job that you're applying for, I would say. But in terms of creating your own portfolio, because your portfolio is kind of like the examples of what you're working in. And I know that might be not when I hire, I'm completely ambivalent about what platform a person has worked in, what cloud environment, because I feel like if you know one, you know them all. There is a learning curve, obviously, and there's particularities. But if you know some of them, then, or if you know one, it's. So I would actually focus on, in the job interview and your kind of how you're presenting yourself, is that I can learn things, on the job, and I can, because I feel like if you're trying to kind of tailor it in advance, it's a bit hard. And when I hire people, I actually look for, curiosity and, ability to learn new things. So I think that is what I would highlight. So, yeah, what you think.
I think, I mean, I think the problem that we have, especially in the data engineering space, is that we have a lot of people who are very, very skilled, and they are very, very skilled in their field, but they are not very skilled in the domain. So I think that is what I would highlight. So, yeah, you know what you think.
I think the amount of CVs that have come across my desk, I wouldn't even say 5% of them have had a portfolio. It's not something that I necessarily look for. Not having one would not make me not put that person forward for interview. I have hired everyone in my team. I've hired based on the person I see in the interview and how well they can explain themselves, how trustworthy I feel they are, if I can delegate to them, if they're gonna learn. It's less for me about the hard skills of I've done Azure and I've not done AWS. It's more about I've done cloud and this is all transferable to any cloud provider. This is how I learn. So for me, it's about hiring the person rather than the specific skill set. And I honestly wouldn't get too hung up on a portfolio.
I completely agree. I think you should focus more, not so much on the technologies, but really on your problem-solving skills. I've done lots of hiring over the last few years, and obviously so many candidates have not a data engineering portfolio. Actually, I hired mainly machine learning engineers, but so it's very common that people may have like work they've done on their free time on GitHub. I don't want to kind of underestimate the effort that it takes, but it can be a bit repetitive, and sometimes it doesn't really highlight the potential and the skills of the candidate. I confess I tend not to look very much at work that people have done in their free time. Another reason why I have that approach is that when you do that, you actually are setting barriers, maybe against, for example, young mothers, for example, that perhaps they don't have that much time to actually build stuff in their free time. So if for other people also hiring here in this room, it's something very important to have into consideration. So what I always look for is really the creativity, the sense of responsibility and ownership and the curiosity and the problem-solving skills. I think that's a lot more important than specific technologies, even because, as we discussed, the technologies change. So to some extent, it doesn't have a lot of value to look for someone that is very good on a specific package or tool.
Yeah, I don't think I've got much to add to that. I think Zoe covered most of what I'd have said as it comes down to the person. I think be able to tell the story of what you have done, be able to take us through the process, and then I know that you're curious, I know you're interested, I know that you can create and follow a process. That's what I'm looking for. If you've got skills in one area, they're pretty transferable. It's the willingness to learn. If you've got the willingness to learn, then you'll stay relevant in data, right? If you're not willing to learn, it's going to get outdated pretty quick.
Thank you all for taking your time tonight to be here. Also, thank you to the moderator for not throwing in a question about Apache Iceberg. That has been every single panel that I've seen in the past year. So this question is targeted towards Zoe's experience migrating from Tableau to Power BI, but really could apply to any of you for any tool. I run a consultancy which provides cost-effective BI tooling, and oftentimes my clients don't know how to approach a migration. So what was your approach in migrating out of Tableau, and what was one thing you would do differently if you could go back?
Speak to the stakeholders properly and not assume that someone else is doing that on our behalf, to be perfectly honest. As part of the migration, we decided to redesign quite a lot of our reports at the same time. So we migrated about 60% of it, and 40% of it was new data models and new front-end reports. The migrated stuff went really well because it was just basically a copy and paste. The data was already there, we just needed to recreate the front end. For that approach, we looked at what reports were being used the most, put them into a priority order with the stakeholders, moved them over, started like a soft launch with our stakeholders so they could get used to the new tool, and then they were more open to receiving the other stuff. For the new reports, I know that's obviously not part of your main question, but it's a good point that just because you work in data and not necessarily speaking with the customers all the time, it is still really important to make sure you get that feedback documented. We struggled a lot with the front end design of the new reports because there was another team kind of in the middle between us and the stakeholders. So we were delivering what this team were telling us to deliver. Turns out that's not actually what they wanted. So having that open communication is really important in any project. But for us, for the migration stuff, it was just what are people using, decommission what they're not using, put it in a priority order, and start getting the clients and stakeholders used to it gradually.
This is very valuable because I'm currently in the process of we're transitioning a client sort of from one publicity agency to our agency, and we are going to transition them from they currently have a Looker dashboard, but it makes more sense to do it in Datarama, which like pulls all the campaign data. But this is, I would say that talking to the stakeholders and documenting, that's crucial to have a paper trail of everything, because and kind of I think assembling as many requirements as possible and kind of saying this is it, and kind of drawing the lines. So yeah, so I'm going to be taking that.
I don't have that specific experience with migration, but the point about don't trust that someone else has had the conversations for you, I think that applies to every single project in tech. Yeah, so make sure you have absolute clarity, everything written down and documented.
Any more questions?
Okay. Hi. So, not used to hearing myself on a microphone. Sorry. So, in reference to the tooling discussion, which you previously spoke a lot about, I was just curious how would the business domain sort of influence the choices of your tools? Is there any consideration of that? Just, I was curious about that.
I would say not necessarily the business domain. I think obviously it depends on the tool and the problem, but certainly the business problem. So when you choose a tool, you certainly want the tool to be a very good business fit.
Yeah, I would say not necessarily the business domain, but the size, so you don't want to, we didn't have that much data, so going somewhere like AWS or Databricks was not necessarily, that was not the right decision, wouldn't be the right decision. But it's also like, back to the costing plans, is like how much is business, prepared to pay for the accounts, down the line. So it's I would say those would be the considerations, yeah.
Compliance, that's the only other thing that we have. Because we are PCI certified, which is one of the regulations we have to go through because we work with financial institutions, everything we pull into the company has to be vetted by our compliance team. But other than that, it's just what you guys have said.
I think the only thing I'd add is that I think you get a lot of tools that are bought, data tools, by the central data team. You will have domain-specific tools, things like risk tools that risk will look at. You'll have actuarial tools that actuaries might use. So I work in FS, so a lot of different places in FS have their own tools. But I think as a data tool decision, it's more around getting functional requirements from the business of what they need and then making the decision within the data team. That's generally how I find it works.
One more question?
Hello. I really enjoyed this panel. Thank you very much. My question was about your experience and what is the thing you like the most, you enjoy the most in your job?
I like fixing stuff. I really love getting under the hood of a problem and fixing something. That's basically my joy.
Simple.
I love building things, but I think over the last few years, I think what really gives me more pleasure is to really see people growing and learning.
I like the variety because I really enjoy talking to people, but I also enjoy a bit of hands-on stuff, and kind of the higher you go, the less hands-on stuff you do, but then you can still keep up. So I like this variety actually, to do a bit of everything. Yeah, so that's my favorite.
I like seeing people actually use what we build. There are so many, as I said with the Tableau decommission, there were so many reports on there that people weren't using, and with the Power BI tooling that we set up, it was an opportunity to make it something that people would actually use, and they're actually using it now, so that's what I like.
That's a great metric.
Yeah, that's a great KPI.
Yeah.
I've got time for one more, to see one more last question.
There's one in the front here.
Thank you. I just want to ask, when you're interviewing people, how do you measure, how do you know somebody's curiosity or ability to learn?
You can sometimes tell just from the way in which they approach the question and the way in which they can tell a story of what they've done. You tend to find that with people that have that curiosity, that it comes out in the interview, because you can see them thinking and questioning back. It's more to and fro, because as you're saying things back to them, they then ask more questions. So I think reacting within the interview actually, to me, often shows curiosity.
I agree. In addition, also, I think the sense of honesty and transparency that the candidates show in the interviews, I think usually that's connected with their curiosity, because for you to keep learning things, you really need to be very modest and humble about the things you know and the things you don't know.
Yeah, well, I actually ask sort of, give me an example of when did you learn a new skill, that you didn't know before. You learned it on the job or yourself. And it does, you get a feeling about, it's true, it's very hard to describe, but there is sort of a bit of a passion and hunger for knowledge that does come up, I think, when you are genuinely kind of a curious person and you like to learn, and you're happy to learn. So I think that, yeah, but I just kind of straight up ask that question and see what people give me as an example, yeah.
Sometimes I think I get more out of the questions that the candidate asks me at the end of the interview. How invested are they? How curious are they about what we're doing? If they ask what the first, 30, 60, 90 days looks like, I get more out of that than just the kind of hard skills of me assessing, can you do the job? So it's really important that, as a candidate, you're looking at the company and is it the right fit for you, and that you get to ask those questions as well, because that tells the interviewer a lot.
Any closing remarks, Francis, or take you on the spot?
Yeah, I think they were all really good questions actually, and I think they, in a changing world, there's a lot of things to think about. There's a lot of new tools that you need to migrate. There's a lot of people that you need to coach. There's a lot of learning you have to do yourself, and do it together. I guess things like this, coming together as a community. Data's a great space and has a great community, so use it. And any questions at the end, come speak to us. We're happy to keep the conversation going. I'm going to hand back to you, Harry, or am I hand to Jamie?
Yeah,
Who was closing?
One of the two of us.
Jamie's at the back.
Yeah, he's at the back. Can we get a round of applause for everyone here? That's brilliant. Thank you again. Thanks for the time as well. Yeah, I think nice, it's 7:30 now. We've got some nice time to network until about 8:30, Francis. Ish.
45 minutes here and then head out?
Yeah, about 45 minutes. So yeah, absolutely feel free to grab any drinks, chat to the guys here, chat to Census as well. So thanks again, by the way, it's really, really appreciated. But yeah, hope everyone had a fantastic night. Any questions to Engineers London or WiseTech as well, just come grab me. And I think we're heading to the Albert around about 8:15. It's just down the road, you will see it straight away. And you'll see a big group of stars outside as well enjoying a pint. But yeah, thanks everyone, really enjoyed that, thank you. Really good. Thank you.